Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today we're going to talk about Beethoven and baloney. And you might be thinking, that's a bunch of baloney. But we're going to see why music is so important and talk about a couple of the ways actually that music is used, uh, sometimes against you, but ways that you can use music as well to learn, to remember, to encapsulate some memories, and to really kind of change your state of consciousness and your emotions. So, with that, we're going to roll that episode now. All right. So, from the title of this, you're looking at it and you're like, hold it, Beethoven's wig and baloney. Are you kidding me, Jason? Right? Hey, I like to come up with catchy little titles. That's part of the fun that I have in doing these podcasts, is coming up with what I think are creative titles, but also once you've listened to the episode, you understand why maybe I titled it that way, and it's just memorable. Okay. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today related to music, is how music actually is a way to create and store memories. It's a way for us to learn, and it's a way for us to kind of encapsulate some of these experiences and change our states of consciousness and emotions as well. Okay. And so we're just going to kind of jump in no particular uh, order, let's say, but here we go. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you are bombarded with music all the time. So when you walk into a store, they're playing music in the background. You may not notice it, but they're playing music in the background. Most of the time, when you go into a restaurant, they have music playing. And there's a reason why they do that, right? There's a whole psychology behind music. Certain songs, certain beats, other different things like that cause people to do certain things like buy more products or feel a certain way so that you want to buy more products. So that's why those things are used, in places like stores and restaurants. Now, you also see them in movies all the time as well. Sometimes it's instrumental, sometimes it's not. But music is used again as a way, sometimes subconscious, sometimes conscious, in order to get you to feel a certain way in certain scenes in the movie. And in fact, we don't notice it quite as much. But a few weeks ago, I was traveling, and so I was by myself in the for the evening, just me and my dog in the hotel room, and decided that I was going to watch a movie on my computer, which I rarely do, right? Because if I'm going to watch something, I usually sit down and watch it on the television. But I was watching it in my room on my computer. And so I had my headphones in so that I wasn't disturbing the people that were in the rooms next to me. And I remember sitting there watching this movie, and all of a sudden I just kind of I'd pause it because I'm like, hold on, I'm hearing music. And it was music like all the time through this movie. And it wasn't just instrumental. Sometimes it was even like a very low lyrical song as well, even while the actors are talking, right? And so at first I kind of did a little double take, and I paused the movie because I'm thinking that maybe the people in the room next to me are listening to music and I'm hearing it, but that's not what it was, right? I'd hit pause and it would go silent, and I'd hit play again and I'd hear the actors talking, and then I would hear the music underneath it. So I could see that much more, like I said, because my headphones were on, that a lot of times, probably when I'm watching it on the TV and it's just kind of coming out of the speakers, I don't notice it quite as much. But music is everywhere, right? And again, some people are using it to get you to feel certain things or buy their products. And so let's talk about, if they're using it that way, maybe there's some ways that we can consciously and proactively use music to help us in our life, right? Because if they're using music to get you to feel a certain emotion, then you can also use music to feel a certain emotion if you want to, right? And again, if you want to. So I remember I was sharing some of this information in a class that I taught a few years ago. It was 6 or 8 week course that I kind of taught online about music. And I remember one of the people that was in it um, had there were some natural disasters going on in the area of Central America where he lived. I think there was a huge hurricane or something that hit, and so the power was off. Everybody was kind of in fear, and they were just hunkering down in their house. And I remember him asking me, he says, you know, we're all kind of feeling this fear. What music should I listen to so I don't feel fear? Now, the answer to that question is going to be different for each person, right? And so this is what I told him. I said, well, it probably doesn't matter exactly what song it is. What matters is find something that makes you feel the way you want to feel. So if he's sitting there feeling it in fear and maybe he wants to feel peaceful instead, then maybe find a song that makes you feel peaceful. And so for me, one of those is the Eagles' Peaceful Easy Feeling, right? I like the way your sparkling earrings lay against your skin so brown. And I want to sleep with you in the desert tonight with a million stars all around. 'Cause I got a peaceful, easy feeling. And I know you won't let me down. 'Cause I'm already standing on the ground. Okay? So I I haven't memorized that song per se, right? But I've listened to it a lot. I played it on my guitar and without any cue, because again, I record these all live. I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. Sometimes I have a few bullet points to remind myself, but that song, wasn't something that I was necessarily going to share in this particular episode. But I remembered the words, right? I had memorized the words, and one of the reasons why I memorized the words is it's lyrical. I've talked about poetry before, and it is, set to music, and so it's easier to remember some of those things, right? So, and when I sang that song to you right now, I want you to kind of check in. How are you feeling before I sang the song? How are you feeling after the song? Right. And I'm guessing if you're like most people, you probably feel a little more calm. You feel a little more peaceful, right? Because at least for me, that's a song that helps me feel peaceful. So again, to this man, if he wanted to feel peaceful, maybe that's a song he could listen to and listen to it over and over and over again until you get to that state of consciousness or that emotional level of feeling peaceful. Now, maybe instead, maybe he wants to feel excited. And so you play something like I'm So Excited from the Pointer Sisters. I don't know, right? It's going to be different for each person. And even for each person, it's going to be different at different times. And so you have to just rely on your intuition to know what you need to hear at that time. Right. And so that's why sometimes, again, I think I've shared this here before. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and one of the things I remember from dream time is a song. And sometimes I know exactly what the song is. Sometimes I only have some of the lyrics and I can't remember what the name of that song is. So I have to kind of do a little Google search and find it. And then I sit and listen to that song over and over again because there's some reason that I need to hear that song that day. And sometimes there'll be an artist who's stuck in my mind for a month and it's different songs from the same artist. Sometimes I'll wake up every day for a week with the same song in my head. I never know, right? And so again, but that's a way in which we can actually use music more proactively in helping us get to where we want to be. Okay. Now, another thing with music, as I said, is it helps you to actually learn and remember things. And so, we do certain things like mnemonics, right? Where we end up coming up with maybe a way in which to remember how to spell something. And so the title from today's podcast is an example of this, right? Beethoven and Bologna. Okay, now those are two words that a lot of people might misspell or can't remember exactly how to spell. And so for myself, I've kind of created mnemonics for both of those that are kind of funny as a way for me to remember it, right? And so, if you're familiar with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, what did they call Beethoven? It was Beethoven, right? And so if you think about it as Beethoven, uh, that's how you spell it. Beat, Beet, Hoven, Hoven, right? But we pronounce it Beethoven, right? But you can say Beethoven as a way to remember it. Bologna, the same thing, right? It's a Italian word, but I remember how to spell it by saying Bologna, Bologna, right? Bolog, Bolo, G, G, and A, right? Bologna. And so those are ways, again, that we remember. And again, if you think about maybe some of the songs, often there are song lyrics or other things that may come into your mind that you can remember. And a lot of times it's easier for us to remember things, right, if they are placed to music. So, as an example, I grew up Mormon. And so in the Mormon church, there's a president of the church that they often call the prophet. And so as a little kid, in Sunday school, I had to, they wanted us to remember the names of all the prophets. And so somebody wrote a song that we would sing in Sunday school as little kids that was a way for us to remember the names and the order of the prophets in the Mormon church, right? And again, so you see this a lot of times in education where we will use music or we'll write music to help us in remembering certain things. Sometimes, again, listening to music while you're learning will actually help. If I remember right, I think it's Vivaldi's Four Seasons. There's actually been some different scientific research on it that when people listen to that particular music while they're studying, they remember it easier, right? And so again, that may be something for you to do if you're learning something, if you're going to school, maybe if you're studying for a professional certification exam, as an example. Using music or having some music involved in your studying may or may not work for you. Some people need it to be completely silent, and that's okay. Other people need some background noise, right? You probably know those people that have the TV going or the radio going in their house all the time, even though they're not really listening to it because they feel like they need some background noise. Okay. But as I said, these are ways for us to kind of remember certain things. And so going back to the title, Beethoven's Wig, right? And again, it's like, that's kind of random, Jason, right? Yeah, maybe Beethoven wore a wig, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Some of his pictures it shows him in a wig and others don't. But that is an example, right, of a song that was created to help children in learning about Beethoven and specifically about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And so, again, when I say Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, you may not remember exactly which one of his symphonies that is, but when I get into it now and I use Beethoven's wig, now you're going to remember it. You're going to know that Beethoven's wig, right, equates to Beethoven's fifth. Okay. And I'll get into that here in just a minute, but Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is one of the most well known that he has done. And what's interesting is in some languages, kind of the name of that symphony or the name that goes along with it is Destiny Knocks Upon the Door. Okay. And so, for me, again, it's a good reminder of is destiny knocking on my door? And if destiny is knocking on my door, am I opening the door and listening? Right. So, how does it go? Right. Well, if you use the Beethoven wig, it goes kind of like this. Beethoven's wig is very big. Beethoven's wig, Beethoven's wig, Beethoven's wig. Beethoven's wig, Beethoven's wig, Beethoven's wig. Beethoven's wig is very big. Beethoven's wig is big. Okay? So there you go. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Okay? But the beginning of it, right? Da 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 da, right? That's somebody knocking on the door. That's destiny knocking on the door. So he actually wrote that, right, to mimic someone knocking on the door. Da 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 da. Okay. So you learn a little bit more about classical music. You might be like, thank you, Jason, or like, no, thank you, Jason. But there you go, right? So that is a way for us to learn, right? Is by incorporating music. Now, another place where you see this a lot is in commercials. And so, in a lot of the commercials, especially that are done now, usually there's more instrumental behind what they're saying. But if next time you watch commercials, which for me I normally don't. Sometimes now on Amazon, they make you watch a commercial beforehand, or sometimes on YouTube, but I rarely watch regular TV unless it's watching football. And so football just started again. And so actually I've seen a few commercials again because I have to kind of watch them while I'm watching the game. But if you listen to them, you'll see that there's music in every commercial. And again, there's a reason for that, right? If there's music in every commercial, there's probably a reason. And again, it's to get you to feel a certain way, to buy their product. Sometimes they'll use regular songs. I think one of the famous ones was when Microsoft first started with their, I think it was Windows 95. It was the first one that had the start button at the bottom. And so they wanted to remind people to use the start button. And so they licensed the Rolling Stones song "Start Me Up" and used that song in their commercials, actually, as a way to again take a well-known song that most people already knew and link it to their product, right? So if you like the Rolling Stones song, in theory, you should like Microsoft because Microsoft is using or endorsing that Stones song, but it's also teaching you to remember to use the start button, right, in Windows. Okay. So, and I don't even know if that's the same now. I haven't used Microsoft products in over 20 years, so I don't know what they're using now. But anyway, but in commercials, and so the same thing, just like with song lyrics, there used to be a lot more songs and jingles. Sometimes they would call them jingles. So go back to really kind of the 50s, late 40s, 50s after the Second World War, up until, into the 80s at least, there were a lot more commercials that had jingles in them. And actually even before that, because once radio started, I remember there were some things in radio starting back in the 30s that would be jingles as well as for the commercials. And so some examples of this, right? And in fact, a lot of these jingles were actually written by some very famous songwriters and singer-songwriters. In fact, I remember a story that get to it here. that Barry Manilow, if you remember Barry Manilow, actually wrote a lot of these songs and jingles for a lot of different companies at that time. In fact, one of them that, if I remember correctly, was attributed to him is the one for Band-Aids. And, again, so if you're older like me, you might remember some of these commercials. But if you remember, I'm stuck on Band-Aid and Band-Aid stuck on me, right? That was Barry Manilow. And again, so what were they doing? They were using music and a catchy rhyming kind of pattern, similar to what we hear in music, to remind you that, hey, when you put a band-aid on, it sticks to you, it doesn't fall off. Because a lot of the early adhesive bandages like that uh, didn't stick very well. And so they would get wet or you'd sweat and they just fall off. And so Band Aid was trying to differentiate themselves by using that in their commercial. Okay. Now, there's other commercials again, too, that even though I have not heard them in 30 or 40 years, I still remember. Okay, so see if you remember some of these as well. But these are examples again of where the companies used music to be able to sell their products and to have you remember them. Okay, so here's one. My baloney has a first name, it's Oscar. My baloney has a second name, it's Meyer. And if you ask me why, I'll say I can't remember all the words to say, but Oscar Meyer has a way with Bologna. Okay? Forgot some of the words in the middle there, right? But the important parts that Oscar Meyer wanted me to remember, I remember, right? My baloney has a first name, Oscar, Oscar, last name, Meyer, Meyer, right? Oscar Meyer baloney. And they even are telling you how to spell it, Bologna, right? And I think even still probably Oscar Meyer bologna is probably the number one selling bologna around. But that's another example, right? And if you're a little bit older like me, you probably remember seeing those commercials on TV and hearing them. And that commercial has stuck with me for a long time. In fact, guess what? When I go to the store and I buy bologna, what do you think? Which kind of bologna do you think I buy? It's usually Oscar Mayer, right? Because that's what I grew up with. That's what I was kind of indoctrinated with. That's what I got used to from a taste perspective. Now, as far as nutritional content, there's probably better options. But when I splurge and do something like that, I'll usually still buy Oscar Mayer bologna because of an ad that I heard over 40 years ago, right? Now, here's another one. It's maybe a less known one, but it was one that stuck to me. And anytime I hear somebody say, bringing home the bacon, I automatically, when I hear that term, bringing home the bacon, right, which again is an idiom used in English to usually mean that you're going to work, you're bringing home the money, you have the money to bring home food for your family, right? And so bringing home the bacon, because bacon is a kind of food. It's a very tasty food as well, right? Bacon, 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 bacon. Okay. So when I hear that term, even if it has nothing to do with this commercial, one of the first things that I remember is an old advertisement that went something like this. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never, never let you forget you're my man, 'cause I'm a woman, Angeline. Okay, there's a song. Now, what was this selling? It was selling perfume called Angeline, right? But it was targeting women, especially at that time. This would have been probably in the 80s when more women were actually going into the workforce. And so it was a way of kind of saying, look, you're a strong woman, you have your own job, you bring home money. but you're still a woman, cooking for your man and smelling good by buying our perfume, right? So again, there's power, right, in music. There's power in poetry, in the ways that we feel, in what we learn, in how we're being sold to, right, as well. Because I told you, I mean, that Oscar Meyer commercial was, you know, spot on, right? It's got me to buy Oscar Meyer Bologna for 40 plus years, right? Whoever came up with that jingle, right, made millions or billions of dollars for Oscar Meyer from that song. So let's talk about maybe one more or a couple more, and then we're going to wrap up for this week. But another one is, how music ends up kind of encapsulating our memories, or certain helps us to retrieve memories easier. And it's not just remembering, but it's actually almost like viscerally re-experiencing that experience again. And so I'll say it kind of in this way, or use this as an example to kind of explain how this works. So I've gone to a lot of concerts in my life, right? Live concert, you go to some venue, it could be a huge, I've been in the Rose Bowl in LA where there were probably 80,000 people watching U2, to little small venues where there were 10 or 20 people and somebody's kind of playing live, right? But listening to live music and being in a group like that, there's a certain experience or feeling that kind of goes along with it, right? And so, we're going to kind of talk about that because again, and for people that haven't experienced that, they just don't know, right? But if you've gone to a concert, then you know what I'm talking about. There's a difference between being at the concert versus just listening to it, right, on your phone. And so I know, one of my family members, I remember at one point told me, I don't know why you pay all that money to go for a concert when you can buy the CD for $15, right? Instead of paying $50 to go to the concert. Well, there's a big difference between going to the live concert and just listening to it, right? And if you've ever done that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So as an example, right, for the live concerts that I've gone to. Now, when I listen to that music again on my phone, I have a very different experience, right? Because I'm remembering the emotions. I'm feeling the vibration of the speakers, right? Because some of the places I'd sit closer to the speakers and so I could actually feel the vibration of the music in my body. I couldn't hear for the next day or two, right? Because my ears had to get used to it again. But there's a whole different experience related to it. And so again, there's probably certain music that you might hear, like let's say it was the song for your prom, your senior year in high school, right? There's usually a theme song that they would do with proms. So if you hear that song, it probably brings up all those memories, all of those emotions about going to your senior high school prom. If you have a special song with your partner or your husband, wife, whatever kind of relationship you're in, when you hear that song, you're going to feel different emotions as well. And it's going to bring up, again, all of these different experiences. And so, again, music is a way to help us encapsulate and remember some of these things. But it's not just remembering consciously, it physically opens, it or metaphorically opens the whole floodgate of all of the experiences that may be going through there, right? So again, it's what happens. So how can you use this consciously if you want to, right? And again, it's the kind of music that we choose to listen to can make a big difference because you can choose proactively what you're going to listen to. If you're going to listen to a song that is depressing about how, my dog ran away and my truck broke down and my girlfriend left me and oh, woe is me, I'm so sad. Well, if that's the kind of music you're going to listen to over and over again, what sort of state of consciousness or what kind of emotion do you think you're going to be in? You're going to feel pretty rotten, right? If you're listening to songs like I'm so excited, right? Or it's such a good feeling to know you're alive, right? Mr. Rogers, that song brings up all kinds of emotions and helps me get going and excited for the day. Songs like Eye of the Tiger from Survivor. Dun, 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 right? And you can remember Rocky, from the movie Rocky as well. You can bring some visuals into it. That song gets me pumped up. It gets me excited. If I'm having to do something that I'm finding challenging to do and I need a little bit more adrenaline and a little bit more self encouragement to do it, listening to a song like that helps me do it, right? Now, another way is as we're kind of ending up here for this episode, some other ways that you can use it is just to create silly songs or just sing what you're saying off key or in a silly way, right? Because whether you realize it or not, everything is created and destroyed using sound, frequency, and vibration. Every creation, every destruction uses sound, frequency, and vibration. Okay. And so, again, if there's certain things that you want to create or certain, certain emotions where you want to get to, right, is you can actually use music in a way to help you get to where you want to go. So, for example, you know, um, if you want to say negative, you can say it in a singing in an upbeat way, right? I remember one of my professors in college. He used to work for the marketing company that did a lot of marketing for Kellogg's, and so he knew the guy who was the voice of Tony the Tiger. And so if you remember the old Frosted Flakes Tony the Tiger commercials, they're great, right? Well, he knew the guy that did the voice acting for that. And often what would happen is they would be in business meetings, and all of a sudden this man would start talking like Tony the Tiger, especially if it was a tense part of the meeting or they were arguing about something. And just by doing that, right, that how it changed the meeting. You can do the same thing. I try to talk in different accents sometimes, right? That if you want to just be silly, especially if it's a heavy topic or something like that, and sometimes you start feeling better, right? Or I am happy, oh still happy, right? Even if you're feeling down, if you start kind of saying that or singing that to yourself, before you realize it, you're probably going to start feeling good again, right? So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share with you again today some of the power that is there in music. And like I said, music is already being used on you, so you might as well use music for you, right? From your standpoint as well. So, what state of consciousness, what emotion do you want to be in, right? If you want to create certain memories with other people, maybe incorporate music into it, right? If you're trying to remember things, again, my Bologna has a first name, Beethoven's wig, whatever it might be, to be able to help you get there. And I'm going to end kind of just with an example of that as well, where it was many years ago. I went to a Beatles cover band concert. Right, so it was one of the famous Beatles cover band here in the U.S. They dressed like the Beatles. They come out and they sing, and they sound exactly like the Beatles. Okay, but so I was there at this concert with my son, my teenage son, and if you're familiar with the Beatles song "Hey Jude," it's a beautiful song and a wonderful song in so many different ways. And so little backstory on that, and then a little of my experience with that song, Hey Jude. So, when John Lennon divorced his first wife, they had a son named Julian. So, Julian Lennon's nickname was Jude. And and obviously, kids of divorce is hard on kids most of the time, right? Because mommy and daddy are no longer together. You don't see the other one all the time. And so Julian didn't get to see much of John, and he was feeling, a little down. And so Paul McCartney actually wrote the song Hey Jude, actually for Julian. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Right? And so if you go back and you listen to that song now, kind of with that, if you didn't know that was a story, think about little Julian Lennon, who was hurting probably because mommy and daddy had a divorce, right? And, think about it from that standpoint, right? And about here it is, a caring friend at the time, Paul McCartney, trying to look after or help and be there for Julian and also for John as they were going through this, right? But if you remember in that song, one of the best parts of the whole song, right, is when it goes na 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 na, hey Jude, Judy, 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 right? Okay, and it goes through kind of in that refrain area towards the end. And if you've ever been in a group of people who are listening to that song together and they all start singing, it's an amazing experience, right? And if you've never seen that before, I know it was in one of the episodes of Ted Lasso. They had that, they used that song in one of the scenes. And so it was the same thing. It was, Ted's son was visiting him in England, and, Ted was divorced from the boy's mother. And he didn't get to see daddy because daddy was in England and he lived in Kansas. But he was over visiting him, and Ted was on the phone call. And so Coach Beard, who was Ted's friend, in a way kind of acted like uh, Paul McCartney did in trying to help care about this boy who was hurting and didn't even realize it. And the busker that was in the area there was playing Hey Jude. And so they started singing the song, and at the end, Ted ended up coming back so that they were singing that most memorable part, at least for me, of the song together. And so, again, back to that concert that I went to with my teenage son at the time, here we were singing Hey Jude, right? And during a lot of the concert, I was singing along with a lot of the songs because I really enjoyed the songs. And we get to Hey Jude, and it was the same thing, right? We're singing along, and then all of a sudden the energy really gets intense, and everybody in the room is singing na 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 na, right? And I remember, my son and I looking at each other as this is playing. The emotions are really kind of swelling up in this room, and I know, at least for me as a dad, that's one of my fondest memories of raising my son by myself, right? Because again, we got divorced when he was one of my most fond memories of that time. There were a lot of memories I don't want to remember about that time, but I can always latch on to that particular experience and remember the feeling and remember the love that I felt for my son at that point. Why? Because music was involved. Okay. So, with that, I am going to wrap up for this week, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a great week, and go find some music that helps you to get to the emotional state where you want to be. And we'll see you on the next episode.